South Africa's Social Development Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, says that introducing a new basic income grant in the country will likely be phased in over several years, with our department currently pushing for an extension of the 350 Rand Social Relief of Distress grant as a baseline. Zulu made the comments while responding in a parliamentary question and answer session in which she was asked about the government's plans to introduce a basic income grant for adults between the ages of 18 and 59. The Social Development Minister said she's of the view that the 350 Rand grant will provide a basis to introduce the basic income grant, but that an amendment of existing legislation is required to formally introduce the new scheme. The 350 Rand Social Relief of Distress grant is set to conclude at the end of March 2022. Zulu's comments aligned with recommendations made by a panel of experts in December 2021, with the group proposing that the country gradually implement a basic income grant, beginning with the institutionalization of a monthly welfare payment. The panel was appointed by the Departments of Social Development, the International Labour Organization, and the United Nations-backed Joint Sustainable Development Goals Fund. Our focus today is on basic income grant in South Africa. Is it to be or not to be? This is Business Edge. I am Lekan Onabanjo, standing in for Tolu Lokpe Adelere Balogun. Joining us on the show is Siyabulela Mama, spokesman for the Assembly of the Unemployed. Good morning to you, Sia. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Lekan, and thanks for having me.
Let's start this way, Sia. Now, how valid is the argument for and against the payment of the monthly basic income grant for poor South Africans?
So what I can say to you, it falls under the austerity policies that the South African government has been employing. And as you showed in the show earlier, that South Africa has the highest unemployment rate in the world and amongst emerging economies. And while we face that, we have over 45% of the South African population is unemployed. Over 73% of this 45% is young people. So that says a lot. And as the Assembly of the Unemployed, we have been warning that the cuts in government spending, the cuts in the wage freeze, the employment freeze, will create greater levels of joblessness in a country that faces inequality. And for that extent, the argument against a basic income grant is flawed, given the July unrest, which we've seen many people in Gauteng and in parts of KZN revolting because they hungry. And I mean, in South Africa, every week, over 10 million people each and every week go to bed hungry. 3 million of these are children. So that says a lot. And I think earlier this week, there was a survey by Open Dialogue that actually young unemployed people spend each and every month looking for a job about close to 1,300. So that says a lot. And while we have this unemployment rate, which is high, at the same time we face a high rise in the prices of food. And while we face this high rise in the prices of food, we face also a high retrenchment rate. I mean, over this 2-period cycle, over 3 million workers have lost their jobs. So instead of gaining jobs, we're losing jobs. So this is a basis and a need for a basic income grant. And it says that a basic income grant in South Africa is long overdue.
Now, Sia, according to a study by World Inequality Lab, Now, the gap in inequality is said not to have closed since the end of apartheid in 1994, and the richest 3,500 adult South Africans own more than the poorest 32 million people. So, is the issue actually with unemployment rate having the grant getting a pass, or the fact that there is inequality when it comes to the distribution of wealth?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and if we can think about this and we look at this properly, you know, during post-apartheid and during 1994, we saw neoliberal policies that were globalizing, that were liberalizing, highly liberal, and that concentrated on financialization. So what this meant was that the pattern of investment changed. Now we started to see deindustrialization. Companies were taking their investments elsewhere, and many companies taking their investments into the financial sectors, into the JSE, into the mining sector, which are highly extractive sectors. And instead of building factories, we saw people putting their money into bond derivatives and the building of malls instead of creating factories. So it's the unemployment rate that we face right now, by the way, is also an issue of the shift in the introduction of the neoliberal policies that has been introduced in South Africa. One of them being gear. So and that's where we've also had a problem. Um, so that's where we've had the problem. But at the same time, while we have this problem, we also face a problem where you also have highly skilled people who have lost their job. The over 3 million people, workers who've lost their jobs, are highly skilled workers and have been skilled for years. So we're losing them. So really, what we need is an investment that will talk to reindustrialization. And as the Assembly of the Unemployed, we're saying, yes, we need a basic income grant, but we need a basic income grant with a constitutionalized right to work. Government must introduce a constitutional right to work because we want to look for work. And that's why young people spend over a month, 1,300 looking for work, right? So we need reindustrialization, but reindustrialization that is low carbonized, because as we face this problem of unemployment, we also face the problem of climate change. So we have to think about that too. And hence, we have been talking about the 1 million climate jobs campaign, which will create 1 million climate jobs that will be in the transport sector, in the renewable sector, and in other important sectors of the economy, such as agriculture through agroecology. So that are the issues that we have been talking about. But at the same time, we're saying infrastructure. We have a very bad infrastructure. Hire people to build houses, hire people to build roads. Those are the jobs that are needed for the economy. So why is the government not doing that? But with this all, not forgetting the efforts and the power of communities and what communities are already doing through cooperatives and such corporate organizations in KwaZakele through renewable energy, like the KwaZakele Transition Township. So we're saying we acknowledge that power, and that power must be built on these efforts.
Did you see from what you said, the jobs are not there because according to reports, 35% of South Africans are unemployed. But then why do critics now come out to say the grant, that is the basic income grant, is not needed when it's meant to be a stopgap for those who are not employed and those who are poor, or should we say indigents in the society? Why criticize is where this could be actually a stopgap for them, pending the time the investments and intervention comes in terms of job creation by government when it comes in?
Um, so the main argument in mainly for this is that there is no money, and that there's not enough money to fund a basic income grant. And we have argued against this, and we have showed where the money could come from. And by the way, this is also has been we have been arguing with this and qualifying with saying we don't need to borrow money from the World Bank. I mean, recently South Africa has got about, I think, 750 million from $750 million from the World Bank. So that means more austerity, and we really do not need to borrow money from the World Bank. And there's been a plethora of studies and reports that if you tax about 3 to 7% of the rich, you could get about 165 billion per annum. And that's the money that could be used to fund a basic income grant. And the issue of illicit financial flows, we've been saying, if you can stop corruption, 300 billion is leaving South Africa um, through profit shifting. So stop corruption, stop illicit financial flows, take that 300 billion and shift it into funding a basic income grant, shift it into funding a basic income grant. And by the way, there's currently a case going on right now between AMCU, which is a mining and construction union, and Lonmin. That Lonmin is actually taking away outside of South Africa about 45 billion rands through profit shifting. And that's the money that could be used to pay a social wage for the unemployed, and some of it to increase salaries for workers, and it can do a lot. And we've been saying you can also borrow from yourself. There's under through the government employee pension fund, there's at least under 2 trillion rands under accumulated reserves. We're saying, and workers to this money are contributing 6% of it. So we're saying to the South African government, take this money, fund a basic income grant. And you can do this through, you can borrow from yourself through less than market rate, so that you can consolidate your debt, which is one of the reasons for austerity. You can do that. And these are the issues that we've been actually calling for. And by the way, and the money from the GEPF is money that is also invested into the JSE in companies like MTN, companies like Glencore, companies like Sasso, which are also repressive to workers and contribute to extremism.
Okay,
So these are the issues and the debates that we have been bringing up.
all right, so basically you're saying or advocating no to borrowing, but income shifting in terms of taxing the rich so as to fund these grants for the poor. But then stay with us, Sia. We will be right back with you. I will join you in a bit. Looking at what Sia has said, it is believed that a basic income grant in South Africa, well, will help combat poverty, but then would it help reduce unemployment? Well, some people think it will further discourage the poor from fending for themselves or getting a proper job. Anyways, on the flip side, we get to find a balance for this, and also if the South African government can afford it, if the demand proposal prevails. We'll go on a break right now. We'll be back with more on Business Edge. Still with me on Business Edge is Siyabulela Mama, spokesman for the Assembly of the Unemployed. And we have been talking about how significant, sustainable, or otherwise, is a basic income grant initiative for South Africans if it gets approved for implementation. Now, back to you, Siyabulela. Now, an extension of the current COVID relief grant of 350 rands will cost South Africa approximately 35 billion rands by the end of the year. And if that is used as a base guide for the proposed basic income grant, it will be between 157 and 159 rands. That's according to statistics. And you have also mentioned the need for income shifting, pulling from the rich in terms of taxation and using it to fund the poor. But when you pull all these funds together, the question is, can South Africa actually afford it?
So South Africa can afford a basic income grant, and actually the 350 the 350 rands grant is also not enough. Um, if you look at it per day, it's about 11 rands and some change a day, which cannot even buy you a loaf of bread if you change it to a day. So we've been making these arguments for many years now that you investing workers' money, you investing the money that's in the GEPF that you have accumulated into a JSE. It's time we put this money into use. Um, I mean, under 2 trillion rand sits in under the GEPF, and workers continue to contribute 6% to it. So if you take this money, um, you put it into financing a social wage. That's where you could afford to pay a basic income grant, and this money would come to you through spending, because there will be economic activity, there will be buying power, so there will be more spending that's happening into the economy, and that's our argument. And we've been saying, look, you're letting the rich go away with a lot. So why are you not taxing the rich? Introduce a progressive a wealth tax, and through this we could gain about 165 billion that you don't need to go elsewhere to borrow. Redirect this money into funding a basic income grant. And while you're doing that, you could focus on a way of reindustrialization and into a low carbon, true 1 million climate jobs. And that's what you could do to create and enact unemployment, to eradicate unemployment. And rich people are taking away over 300 billion into the South African economy without it being taxed. And the argument for that is like, we need these people to come and invest, but it's extractivism. So we're saying, stop illicit financial flows, stop profit shifting, take the money, the over 300 billion rands, which AMCU is also now fighting for, put it into the economy. This is the money that could be used for an investment that would create productivity into the economy and create employment. At the same time, fund a permanent basic income grant. And that's what we've been arguing for. I mean, people want jobs, they want to work, but there is no work. People, and to prove that, people are even using out of their money over about 1,300 rands per month. That tells you something, that people want work, and the basic income grant will also help people to look for work. They won't stay, and you must constitutionalize the right to work as well.
I'm beginning to get concerned about if this situation will be a case of, if you do, you get damned. If you do not, you still get damned, because we are talking about how to generate these funds in terms of taxation, taxing taxpayers. But then there's this postulation that there's possibility that the tax level could increase to 8.2%. Of course, we might not be able to have an equilibrium. Of course, it will not cut across board. But then how do we balance this? How do you think the government can go about this so that both sides of the coin do not get overtaxed, as it may, or get exploited in the way?
Mm. So what you face currently is that you face people who are working, the working class, people who work in factories, people who work in the public sector. They are the ones who are being
And what
taxed
did you
more.
say?
And at the same time, you'd find that even post-apartheid, we've seen how corporate tax has even decreased, right? So this is what we're arguing for, and even exchange controls. Exchange controls have been loosened. So, and why is that the case? Why you face this pandemic of unemployment? Doesn't that say anything to you that there needs to be a shift? It surely must say something. So that's why we've been making the argument that um, stop tax holidays, because there's an issue of creating tax holidays as well. So stop all of that. Try and bring these companies to contribute to the South African economy. They must actually contribute in a way that is meaningful to the South African population as well. And the state could drive that. The state could drive that. But it's also the attitude to stop this market fundamentalist mindset to do that. The state could do that. I mean, it is no way that you have the majority of the population living in poverty and in unemployment. There's no way that you could face over 10 million people each and every week who are going to bed hungry, over 3 million children who go to bed hungry every week, while you have a problem where the rich are taking away um, over 300 billion through profit shifting. They're not being taxed. And there's been a study which proved in 2020 that if you introduce a progressive wealth tax, you could gain 165 billion. And why is the government not using these mechanisms to do that? Not to mention the money that they have accumulated and continue to accumulate through the GEPF, the under 2 trillion rand that I've been mentioning. So that there really needs to be a shift. And that's what, as the Assembly of the Unemployed, have been trying to say, that we need a shift, we need a structural shift in a way that would help the population. Because if you do this, everyone benefits. The South African economy benefits. Because you have more people who are spending in the South African economy, and that's what we've been saying.
We get to talk about undue spendings from government or accumulations from government, as it were. Probably in our subsequent shows, we get to bring you on and we talk more extensively on that. But we really want to appreciate your presence on Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Section 27, subsection 1 of the South African Constitution reveals that everyone has the right to have access to healthcare services, sufficient food and water, social security, including those who are not able to support themselves and the dependents have some sort of welfareism for them. Well, is this an obligation Ramaphosa will be willing to commit to? We get to see in the coming days or weeks. We'll take another break, and when we return, it'll be time for NC4 to watch. Do stay with us. On NC4 to watch, let's tell you that oil prices eased on Thursday but remain supported by tight supply as OPEC Plus producers stock for two planned moderate output increases despite pressures from US and India. Brent crude fell 17 cents or 0.2% to $89.30 a barrel as at 4:20 GMT after rising 31 cents on Wednesday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was down 31 cents or 0.4% at $87.95 per barrel, having gained 6 cents the previous day. Zambia Finance Minister Situbenko Musokotwane has said that they are expecting an International Monetary Fund debt health check to be finalized this month. This would unlock a restructuring deal with creditors by April and get a formal agreement with the fund signed off in May. Mr. Kotwane adds that he expects the IMF's debt sustainability analysis, which forms the basis of the restructuring plans, by the end of February. Let's also tell you that Egypt's debt should fall below 90% of gross domestic product by the end of the fiscal year on June 30. Finance Minister Mohamed Mait told a news conference in Cairo, exceeding the government's prior expectations. The country's total export revenue reached a record high of $45.2 billion in 2021, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbuli told the conference. And finally, on NC4 to watch, Kenya has floated an international tender from original bus manufacturers, motor vehicle dealers, leasing companies, financial institutions, and interested firms for provision of buses and transport services for the Bus Rapid Transport Project through leasing. Kenya is set to use only green vehicles on the BRT system. The BRT network in Kenya, according to the tender document, will only be operated by electric, hybrid, or biodiesel vehicles. And that's it on today's edition of Business Edge. Do not forget that you can join us on social media. That is at New Central TV. You can also download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store, and visit our website www.newcentral.africa to join the conversations that we have going on that platform. Until next time, I am Lekan Onabanjo.